Okay, we got some breaking news from the NFL world today. So, former Indianapolis Colts head coach, former Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich has now been hired by the Carolina Panthers.
Somewhere along those lines.
I,
Happy
I like those
Halloween
glasses.
Eve.
I like those glasses, dude. They're
Tonight's
nice.
gonna be a thriller.
Have I told you I worked at the World Series? It was my first year at the stadium. I went to Fanatics Fest, I went to Comic Con, and I went to the World Series. It was my first year at the stadium, and the Yankees made it all the way to the World Series. Unfortunately, we lost 5 games to the Dodgers.
I said the Giants will be a perfect fit for John Harbaugh because you already established the quarterback situation, you already established the running back position, you already established the wide receiver position, and you have the top 5 pick in the draft.
Todd Bowles, at best, is a mediocre coach. He did the same situation with the Jets back in 2015, ultimately maliciously ruining a power-hungry Baker Mayfield and potentially Mike Evans.
But Indianapolis ultimately came back, got the go-ahead touchdown. Then, at the end of the game, when Brady got the ball less than a minute, Peyton had his head down the entire time because he knew Brady had enough time. But the interception happened. It's funny. All of a sudden, Peyton Manning hears the crowd roaring. He finally looks up and starts jumping up and down real. Good evening, folks. We are back for episode 4 of Everything on the Table, the first episode of March, and I am joined by my co-host, Agent Warrior X. We're at an interesting point. We're a week away from free agency officially starting. We've already seen a few moves made in the NFL, and the countdown to March Madness begins as well, so there's a lot going on.
Yep, and I kid you not, this is the first episode of March. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 4 of Everything on the Table. I'm your co-host, Agent Warrior X, and today we have a lot of things to talk about before the free agency starts. So there is a word going on that Kyler Murray, the quarterback from the Arizona Cardinals, has officially been released after 6 years of serving the Cardinals and saying, I wonder why Cliff Kingsbury selected him in the first place. The general manager should have gone a long time ago after the moment Steve Wilkes got booted.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real, though. The Arizona Cardinals, I'm not going to say it's all on Kyler Murray. Now, granted, there were questions about his discipline and his willingness to commit to studying the playbook and his commitment, but when you look at how bad the Arizona Cardinals were without him, particularly 2 of the last 3 seasons where he missed a significant amount of time, it clearly reflected on the team record. And you realize, there's much bigger problems than that for Kyler Murray. So the Cardinals want to move on from him and they want to start fresh. Where? Well, I guess we'll talk about that as we get closer to the draft. But for Kyler Murray now, there's an interesting question. What does his future hold? There are several options in mind. Minnesota Vikings could be an option. Maybe the Miami Dolphins if they move on from Tua. Maybe the Falcons, or maybe he goes on to become a backup. But I could see one of the other 3 being more likely.
Sorry about that. Like I was saying before, um, yeah, I think Kyler Murray at this point, I think his best fits has to be the Steelers because Steelers need a quarterback way more than just running it back with Aaron Rodgers. Sure, Kyler Murray has been up and down, but that 2021, in my opinion, was by far the most flukiest year of his career. Sure, Cliff Kingsbury have got themselves first place in the NFC West, but ultimately collapsed at the worst time to an eventual Super Bowl champion Rams. I think it will be a perfect fit for Pittsburgh because they do need a fresh start elsewhere, and I think Pittsburgh, in my opinion, should be the one Yes, you have a defense of TJ Watt and other players, but I think Calvin Ridley and Calvin Austin. But in my perspective, I think Pittsburgh needs pretty much a quarterback more than that.
And there's another potential option too, but we know there's a lot of teams that need a quarterback. So Kyler Murray will certainly be on the market, and he'll certainly be a top flight option for teams at some point down the line. So, or at least during free agency. But the question is where, because I feel like the Steelers and Vikings will probably be the top two looking for someone, because the Vikings are already thinking about shipping JJ McCarthy. Mind you, he missed his entire rookie season, was in and out of the lineup his second season. Yeah, that's a serious red flag about his future as a quarterback and his ability to stay healthy and actually be efficient. So I see why the Vikings would look for a Kyler Murray. Maybe thinking in Kevin O'Connell's system, it could be a different story because we've seen this play out before. Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, some of the greatest historical examples, Steve Young in a new system. So we know that a new team could be what Kyler Murray needs.
I think speaking of Daniel Jones, he's another player that's getting franchise tag. But I don't see him coming back from a torn ACL. I think, in my perspective, if the Colts could keep their head in the game with Jonathan Taylor and re-sign Alec Pierce, I think the Colts on paper still looks like a legit contender. If Daniel Jones doesn't tore his ACL, they would have still been in the playoffs and not had that late season collapse.
Yep, but the point is, though, okay, back to Kyler Murray, though, is, hey, here's a guy who's had his struggles. Part of the problem with the Cardinals isn't just lack of commitment. Look at the structure around him. Where was the offensive line? Where was the consistency at head coach? You had Cliff Kingsbury and Jonathan Gannon leading the way. That's not a great recipe for team success. So Kyler Murray, the best thing for him is to go to a place where he has a competent mind, a coach that we know can lead with a coach is looking for a better quarterback. And I feel like the Minnesota Vikings would actually be a great fit for Kyler Murray in this situation because we know Kevin O'Connell can make magic work when he has a healthy
Look what he did with Sam
quarterback.
Darnold. Look what he did with Sam Darnold. Look what he did with, well, this is before Kirk Cousins departed, but Kevin O'Connell, in my opinion, can magically make quarterbacks a lot better. But the Jets will be the worst case scenario, in my opinion. The Jets are a QB graveyard, period, alongside the Cleveland Browns. I don't think he should go to the Jets because Aaron Glenn might maliciously destroy his career in terms of interceptions, not getting the play calls right, etc. So I think the best fit it's Pittsburgh and Minnesota. Now on to the second topic we're going to talk about. The second topic is Kenneth Walker. There's been rumors going on lately about Kenneth Walker not being part of the Seahawks and not resigning him. I feel like some teams like the Giants and the Seahawks both have something in common in terms of one thing: doing their best players dirty. Like what they did with I think they did it with Geno Smith. They did him dirty. They did pretty much Saquon Barkley dirty, and now they're doing Kenneth Walker dirty. I would be surprised if the Giants go after a running back because there have been a lot of rumors about the Giants taking a running back more than just the best player available. Because again, John Harbaugh's true purpose when he was in Baltimore was a running game and a defensive mindset. But I think Kenneth Walker will be a surprising fit for the Giants. Can you imagine that offense with Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterboo, and him with Malik Neighbors coming back healthy? That would be a dangerous offense.
It's going to be an interesting deal with Kenneth Walker because he's the Super Bowl MVP for crying out loud. This is not when you're fresh off being a Super Bowl MVP hitting the free agent market or being fresh off the Super Bowl winning team, your value goes up in free agency. Now, you don't want to do what the Raiders did in the late 90s, bring in 2 Super Bowl MVPs that really didn't fit in, which we'll get more to that later when we talk about some of the best and worst free agent signings. But for Kenneth Walker, he's going to be a top commodity for teams that need a running back or that are just going to go all in on a running back. Like, I could see maybe the Giants. Who else is a possible option? Maybe the Minnesota
Kansas
Vikings.
City, Minnesota, Denver. Denver needs another running back.
So those are some potential landing spots there for Kenneth Walker if he doesn't return to Seattle. So we'll have to see what they do. And for Seattle, they're in an interesting predicament. They're going to have to pick and choose which contracts they prioritize the most in terms of bringing back players and then figuring out who's going to fill the voids that are left through the draft, because your top players in the free agent market are going to be, top of the free agency. Let's look at last year. Mika Becton, Milton Williams, and those guys ended up getting new contracts fresh off a Super Bowl win. It's going to be the same thing for the Seahawks. So for Kenneth Walker, for Seattle, that should be a top priority re-signing, but we'll see if they do it or not.
So, perspective-wise, we saw Breece Hall pissed off what happened with the franchise tag. I think Breece Hall at this point has to be traded because Breece Hall, don't get me wrong, he's another good running back, but I don't see him as a fit to the Giants. I think his best fit has to be either Kansas City or somewhere else. And by the way, I have the Nets game going on, and I have the Sixers and the Spurs game going on. I still love the throwback jerseys for the Sixers, though. Still timeless.
Oh, yeah, that game just started. I mean, how did the Nets game just start too, or has that been
No. We're in the second quarter. We're in the second quarter.
Okay, so that's been going for a minute against the Miami Heat. So that's in.
At this point, I'm starting to think that the Wizards are just blatantly tanking because the fact that they just got Trae Young back, right? And you know what's crazy? He got ejected. The moment that he was about to make his debut, he got ejected for whatever reason. I think they pretty much got that wrong.
Wow. I mean, Riot Comedy IG is being proven correct so far. When they did their little skit with Luka Brunson and who was it again? Luka Brunson and which
Was it?
Oh
was
yeah,
it-
and Jalen Brunson. Yeah, it was Luka.
Jalen Brunson. It was Jalen Brunson,
Luka, and one of the
Luka
other guys.
Doncic, and I think it was LeBron James or someone else.
It was somebody else. It may have been one of the other point guards. And then they're all talking about how Trae Young
Wait, you
is
talking about
dead.
Cooper Flag,
Anthony
right?
Edwards.
Thank
was
you,
a
Anthony
skit.
Edwards.
Oh, yeah, and they're all sitting there making comments. They're looking at the casket, and then Trae Young's like, hey, I'm not really dead. Why aren't you guys ignoring me? And then Jordan Poole comes in because Washington's the place where careers go to die. And so far, what happens with Trae Young is proving that theory by Riot Comedy IG correct, because he hasn't played a game. He's had more ejections than minutes on the court about a month after the trade.
You know what's crazy? Riot Comedy was right about one thing with the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants went on Thursday Night Football. They called the Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley called Scatterboo and Neighbors frat boys. I was laughing at that joke because they're the exciting whites, because that's the duo. But I called it the duo, the Dart and Scatterboo connection. However, after that Thursday night game, let's just say after the game, the Giants beat the Eagles, and then they just have Saquon and Jalen Hurts on the. I'm sorry, but this is hilarious though. But I love the scoreboard of NBA on NBC. It looks so nostalgic though. It looks so nostalgic because it's a reminiscent of the '90s, of the late '90s with the Bulls, with the Jordan Bulls, but I feel like it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for nostalgia purposes, it's amazing. But now, I'm going to have to catch more of their telecasts because I know they got different voices on the pregame show now that I haven't seen how they meshed yet. Although Tracy McGrady had a hilarious outtake talking about how he was nervous going into a Christmas Day NBC game in his second season, I think it was. But the funny part was he kind of looked nervous in his suit and tie at the time he's saying it on NBC, which was a hilarious outtake. As far as the
But you know
NBA
what
goes,
did change forever? What really changed the sports world forever back then was the scoreboard bug. Like what you're seeing right now, if you're watching NBA on NBC right now, is a nostalgic 90s NBA on NBC. Because back then, in the late, during like the 70s and 80s, you didn't have no scoreboard. So scorebook, sorry. The only thing you could pretty much see was the scoreboard and nothing else. Before you had the strike zone, before you had the what on the yardage percent on the yardage and everything else, you only had the scoreboard and that was it. But over time, before 1993 and 94, everything changed because the scoreboard pretty much keeps track of the status of the game itself alongside the yards, like in college football, for example. College football is another example for having a non-score bug before the score bug back in '94. We I think I saw the video on Urinating Tree because it's actually a
yep.
factual thing what happened with the scoreboard that changed everything in the sports world. And it's absolutely right. And NBA, NHL, MLB, NFL, you can name every league they had, but they had no scoreboard until now, which is why they which is why they which is why the score bug back in 1994 changed everything.
Oh yeah, because even the video UT suggested prior to that, you turn on a game in like the middle of the third quarter, you would have no idea what the score is because you wouldn't see a score box. You would just hear the announcers talking about the current play. You might get like one small hint, but you don't really know what the score is until it would occasionally flash across the screen at random. And that could be for minutes on at a time. So yeah, the score box definitely helps because it keeps fans who tune in, gives them the idea knowing what's going on instead of just tuning in, trying to figure out everything on their own.
Exactly. Because the fact that the score bug changed everything and it's still going on till this day, which I hope to keep. The next thing I want to talk about is the free agency predictions for the NFL. Now we have free agency is next week. We're a week away from free agency, and it's on Mario Day, March 10th, 2026. And free agency, we're gonna have a bunch of players going to different teams. We could see Kyler Murray going to a different team. We could see Kenneth Walker staying with the Seahawks. We could see a lot of teams playing for different players depending on the contracts and the team fit. The first team I'm going to predict is Max Crosby to the Philadelphia Eagles. Here's why. They need another defensive help aside from that young core you formed with the Georgia Bulldogs. I think Max Crosby will be a great fit, and I think they'll get an incredible package in return. AJ Brown is a trade candidate. Keep that in mind. AJ Brown is a trade candidate. But I think Max Crosby would be a perfect fit for the Eagles to start off fresh in a new team.
Yeah, and that would be awesome. But like I always say, don't believe the hype. And another reason why, because now NBC Sports is indicating that the Bears are a potential another spot for him to land. So there's going to be a little bit of a competition there between those teams to try to see who can acquire Max Crosby services. But one thing I believe for sure is he's done with the Raiders. He's put his time in there. He's remained loyal. He's been the best thing about their defense in the 2020s, but it just wasn't enough for him. He's moving on to greener pastures. And wherever he lands, best of luck to you. We'll leave the door open for you in Philly, but whatever happens, Max Crosby, hopefully it works out better for you wherever you go. And now, speaking of defense, Trey Hendrickson's another guy, unrestricted.
I think his best fit would definitely be the Commanders. Commanders needs pretty much everything in terms of the defense and offense. Sure, you may have formed the oldest team in the league, but Debo Samuel is officially walk out the door. They need a receiver, they need another edge, and they need another secondary. Yes, Dan Quinn may have formed the best defense since the Falcons and the Cowboys, but I think Trayvon Henderson would be the perfect fit for Washington. And I think at this point, the defense in Cincinnati, not good at all.
Yo, the Cincinnati Bengals, easily the worst defense on the field and the worst managed defense. Because now you got, God, you had Trey Hendrickson, the best player on your defense. And you gave him a franchise tag just to keep him around for last season. And that didn't do much to help the defense as a whole. Now you're just letting him walk as unrestricted free agent. You think he's going to want to come back to the Bengals and renegotiate with them? No, absolutely not. He's going somewhere else.
Because then again, Washington does need a defensive end. Now for Tyler Linderbaum, his best fit is the Giants. I'll tell you why. He's reuniting with John Harbaugh. That's number one. Number two, the Giants overall need some offensive help in terms of protecting Dart from taking too many hits or being hurt a lot. And the reason why I say Tyler Linderbaum is because the Giants need some offensive help in terms of the O-line. You still need another receiver, a true receiver too, aside from Darius Slayton, and you still need some secondary help. Speaking of secondary help, I heard about Caleb Downs. If it's true that his medical attention could be a torn ACL purpose, I think his draft stock will go low.
Yeah, I think with him, it's either the Giants or somehow the Ravens match and they keep him. It's either one of those two options because really outside of that, I don't see an ideal landing spot for Tyler Linderbaum. Now, the same thing could be said with Isaiah Likely, too. He's pretty much in the exact same boat of either Ravens, Giants, or he could end up going somewhere else, too. Especially if he wants the bag and someone's willing to pay him, which I don't think that'd be the best move, but you never know with some teams what they might do.
I think, to be honest with you, someone said this in the comments. One of them said, "Where's Kyler Murray going?" I think we mentioned this earlier and said that Kyler Murray, 3 destination spots: Steelers, Vikings, and Jets.
Yep, I'm thinking pretty much most likely the Vikings at this point, but we still got a whole week to wait and see, and there's still going to be some tampering rules. Not that it's necessarily going to stop teams from trying it, but we still got a week before we actually get anything official, unless someone decides, hey, to make a trade beforehand or to release someone. But there's that as well. We said there's already the Kenneth Walker story, but really the interesting question as a whole is the Seattle Seahawks, who they're keeping, who they're going to let go.
They're the second in cap space in the NFL. I think they should definitely keep. Well, JSN is already their top receiver. You can't deny that. Cooper Kupp already won a championship with them. How fitting, because Cooper Kupp won a championship with the Rams and now he won a championship with the Seahawks. But I think he can keep a few key players long term and try to release some players for like future development. But I think Kenneth Walker is going to come down between the Seahawks and the Giants. If the Giants can clear some cap space and try to make some cuts, I think they have a possibility to not only get Tyler Linderbaum, but also Kenneth Walker. And rumor has it that Odell Beckham Jr. might go back to the Giants because he did reunite with John Harbaugh at one point when he was on the Ravens.
And as far as OBJ goes, I gotta know this is off subject with football, but with him going bankrupt, Oh my gosh, man. I just got to say it. I said it earlier on the 3-point blitz at noon. You got to be smarter with your money, folks, especially when you're a professional athlete where with them, yeah, you got money on partying, yachts, houses, cars, and then on top of that, eventually, surgeries, monies. And then eventually, after a couple major injuries, the money starts slowing down. The contracts aren't as big. And that's when, that all that money you spent starts to catch up to you, especially when the contracts are coming 1-year deals. They're becoming veteran salaries instead of the big money that he was getting early on in his career. And that happens to a lot of athletes. That's why they got to be smarter with their money because it doesn't always last forever, those big contracts.
Now let's talk about David Montgomery because we heard that David Monty got traded to the Texans. My question is this: what is the Lions doing? Why did the Lions decided to trade David Montgomery, aka Knuckles, to the Texans? That's my question. Why would you trade your best running back to when you have Jamar Gibbs doing his part, and everybody else has been either not getting enough minutes or they're hurt? Why?
Is this, is this about money? Really? Is that what this is about? Because I know that often plays a factor, but sometimes these teams just get really greedy about not wanting to pay these players, so they just ship them off. Is that what it is? Because what are they? What's the plan? I'm really trying to figure this one out. It doesn't make sense for the Lions because you need pieces on your offense and you need them to come back healthy. I just get it.
Sometimes free agency can be very questionable depending on which direction you're going. Aaron Jones got, I think, to be honest with you, that Aaron Jones contract really wasn't good enough. Over time, it didn't last long for the Vikings. And Aaron Jones only made just one playoff appearance. That's it. Nothing else. The next thing I want to talk about is the Elimination Chamber and Monday Night Raw recap because things just really got interesting during the road to WrestleMania. We know what happened at the Elimination Chamber. Rhea Ripley's now facing Jade Cargill this this WrestleMania. We had Randy Orton for the first time in 2 or 3 years to face the championship title against Drew McIntyre. Then we have Cody Rhodes now facing Drew McIntyre this Friday on Friday Night SmackDown. And to top all off, Danhausen from All Elite Wrestling has officially debuted on WWE. And then last night on Monday Night Raw, we have a new champion. Penta has been crowned as the Intercontinental Champion. AJ Lee, for the first time in 12 years, has been crowned Women's Intercontinental Champion. And I think Penta is the right fit because, sure, he may have never won a championship. He may have never won a championship with the with AEW or anywhere else other than Luchador Wrestling, but I think Penta should definitely keep his title a little bit longer to see how that turns out. Now, as for the feud between Seth Rollins and the Vision, he got hurt, correct? If you see the Have you seen the storyline with the Visions and the Vision and Seth Rollins? The Visions just blatantly just turned against him, ultimately having three key players hurt during the storyline. Braun Breaker is out for the rest of the year. Brunson Reed could potentially be out for months. Logan Paul, who is the newest member, who one of the few members of the Vision, not doing good. Austin Theory, not doing good, but he's the newest. And then mostly Paul Heyman. He got stumped, he got speared, and worst of all, he got attitude adjustment by Cena at one point. But I think, in my opinion, Seth Rollins has pulled a 2014 type when it comes to him betraying with the Shield. You remember, if you watch that segment between the Shield and the Authority, Nikki, that was by far peak storyline back in 2014.
Well, hey, as far as the new debut goes, hey, well, this is peak WWE. Hey, they've always borrowed from other smaller territories in terms of getting their talent. Always have, and they always will to some degree. Now, the question is, how are they going to utilize them? Because their history recently has gotten better with utilizing guys like AJ Styles is one example, but historically, they're not the best at utilizing guys from other companies. Like it's either hit or miss with them in utilizing other talent.
Sometimes Triple H has hit and misses when it comes to talents like these. But I think Danhausen, in my opinion, has to be a mixed bag, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong. Danhausen is very nice and very evil, which I find that gimmick pretty hilarious. But where's Hook when you need him? Because is one of the few greatest underrated wrestlers in AEW, sure. But I think the storyline between Seth Rollins and the Vision should definitely be a potential matchup in WrestleMania 42. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of the wrestling topic is CM Punk versus Roman Reigns.
And I'll say this
That
about
promo,
Samoa Joe. I think he
uh,
was a victim of Vince still being in charge when he went to the main roster. Had Triple H been in charge, he probably would have gotten a better run on the main roster, but unfortunately, he didn't really fit with Vince's ideal of what a top guy should be, and ultimately ended up in AEW.
and the last thing I want to talk about is that promo with CM Punk and Roman Reigns. That promo, in my opinion, I think I think CM Punk dropped a pipe bomb. Shades of 2011 Punk when he dropped multiple pipe bombs on criticism towards the front office and the McMahon family. But guess what? What really took it personal, the moment that he said this, he's gonna bury him. He's gonna do something what he couldn't. And that's bury him next to his father. When I heard that, I'm like, I think this could potentially be the greatest Road to WrestleMania promos we have ever seen since Cody Rhodes finally won a championship for the first time in his career. Since he went from a tag team champions, he went from United States champion, Intercontinental championship, but now he's won a championship with the Universal Championship. Now for the Usos, they came back. We know that. Look what happened with the Vision when they encountered Jimmy Uso and LA Knight. The one thing that made me laugh about what happened last night is LA Knight driving on ambulance when Paul Heyman was on the. I'm sorry, but it's hilarious though. But at the same time, this is by far the best segment for after Elimination Chamber.
I'll say this CM Punk, Roman Reigns, that's been something that it's been years brewing for differing reasons. Obviously, CM Punk spent time away. He started wrestling again in AEW, so it wasn't until more recent years where it was a possibility. That was one of those, like, it's exciting because it's one of those things that we thought might not happen. I mean, granted, they worked tag matches before and had a few matches, but never really had anything big. And now all of a sudden, here it is, WrestleMania, something big between those two, something we haven't really seen between those two in the individual programs. Now here it is, finally. And it's special because it's something we thought might not happen.
Yep. And today, ladies and gentlemen, is Tuesday, March 3rd, marking 9 years of the Nintendo Switch release date. Now, the first Switch, was a mix between a home console and a handheld console. Like the DS, like the 3DS, like the Game Boy, like the Neo Geo Go, or any type of handheld consoles you can name. The the Nintendo Switch was by far the best selling gaming consoles, surpassing the PlayStation 2. And I still have the Switch and the Switch 2 till this day. The Switch 2 came in last year when it was first announced Mario Kart World, and I think a lot of people's been saying that the Switch 2 was worth buying because of the games that they're coming out. For example, NBA 2K. NBA 2K went from the original Switch to a Switch 2. Now we have some games that's coming out later this year for the Switch and Switch 2. For the first party games, Pokemon Pocopia is about to be released soon. You have you have the you have MLB The Show 26 that's coming out later. Super Mario Wonder Switch 2 edition that's coming out later this month. Xenoblade Chronicles X Switch 2. Tomodachi Life Living the Dream Switch. For the first time in over 14 years.
Is
You gotta be
everything
kidding me.
oh,
You gotta be kidding me.
the game?
Nope. Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. The New York Giants has officially released defensive captain and linebacker Bobby Okereke entering his final year on a 4-year, $40 million contract.
Okay, wow. What's the plan?
Now your only hope now is to get Sonny Styles, either Sonny Styles or Cardell Tate. Have you seen his draft combined with Sonny Styles? He looks amazing. He looks amazing. And I'm going to say this about what I said about the the Switch games that's coming out later this year. And I think this year is a perfect year for video games and movies. But I think specifically for the Switch, for the first time in 14 years, Tomodachi Life Living the Dream is coming out April 16th, 2026, 2 days before WrestleMania 42. And I kid you not, I do plan on building an island and some bees. Now, if you remember what a bee is, if you play the Nintendo Wii or the DS in Japan, a bee is like a custom character, basically. And I plan on creating not just myself, my friends, and OCs on that game, but I'm also creating some hardcore sports network members on there too.
And speaking of games, it's crazy. Xbox, this could be the final year. This is going to be the final year of games on the console. I guess just, PC gaming, the PlayStation. Well, PlayStation had been beating them for years, but with like you were
Nintendo is still
talking
dominant
about.
till this day. If you want to talk about console wars, you think of Nintendo, PlayStation. Well, technically, Nintendo did dominate Sega back in the early '90s, and then you had PlayStation entering the console wars, and then ultimately in like 2002 or 2001, Xbox hit the market, and now it's officially coming to an end, having Microsoft focus on AI.
Yeah, and it's crazy with PC gaming how far mods have come along. And even like some of the old PS games, like the PlayStation Network still has some mods. Even NFL Street 2 has mods with modern rousters. Also, Madden 11 even has a mod. Even going as far as to make Madden Moments into a mod from the previous season, such as Jet Steelers, where you try to rewrite the outcome and have the Jets steal it at the end, or trying to recreate the Eagles' comeback against the Rams, to name a few. It's crazy how far technology's come along with these mods. Even some of the games like Battlefront 2 has mods.
Star Wars Battlefront, Battlefield, Call of Duty. You can name every FPS game that has been revolutionized, but ultimately at the end, it's always never the same. Fortnite is already dominating. Apex is not the same, and that's pretty much it. Now, for sports video game wise, back then, when the Nintendo 64 came out, the only good sports game you had was Ken Griffey Jr.'s baseball. Sure, Mario Kart 64, Excite Bike 64, Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. You can name every Nintendo 64 bestseller games, but sports wise, Mario Kart 64 and Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball is by far the best ones.
Yeah, and for sports games, I feel like 2K should have done similar to what Fortnite did, where they just, instead of releasing a brand new game every year, just have one game, give it a yearly update, because mostly it's a lot of the same features. It would make just a lot more sense to just do a yearly update. Same with Madden. They should have gone into that years ago. They should have just gone with a yearly update.
Or FC or FIFA or FC. You can name a few sports games that should be updated. But in my perspective, Fortnite nowadays is getting too popular. Yes, you may have got some changes around with Epic and Fortnite itself, but to be honest with you, I think Fortnite is one of the few best games for the games.
Yeah, man, it's a crazy world out there with video games nowadays, man. It's
Yeah,
real
I mean, I'm gonna give
interesting.
you a prime examples of Fortnite collaborating with a few companies based. You have Fortnite collaborate with Naruto. Hold on. Sorry, it's my dog. He always does that every time when a fire truck passes. Um, Fortnite collaborated with Naruto. They did the same thing with Dragon Ball Z. They did with One Piece. They did with Bleach recently. And now they did it with Resident Evil. They did with Halo. They did it with NBA, NFL when the Super Bowl happens, but they never did it with NHL. They did it with some famous players like Patrick Mahomes or Lionel Messi, LeBron James. But why can't Michael Jordan be part of that as well?
Hey, interesting question, but to be fair, Michael Jordan isn't really a big fan of the spotlight in post playing career. Even he admitted in an interview with Rachel Nichols that he doesn't really put himself in the spotlight much because he doesn't have to anymore. So that could be a reason right there. He just
You know, when it comes to wrestling and video games, right? This is the next topic. When it comes to wrestling video games, there is one specific game that was very underrated. Def Jam Vendetta. This was one of the few underrated games back in 2003. And when Def Jam Vendetta came out, nobody knew what Def Jam is until they recognized the famous hip hop artists like Method Man, Redman, Nori, Capone, DMX, God bless, Funk Master Flex. You have Keith Murray, Ghostface Killer. You have two members from the Wu Tang part of that, and now you have WC. You have you have a lot of great hip hop artists on that game, and I think to be honest with you, Def Jam Vendetta was by far the most underrated game. It was like hip hop mixed with WWE on crack. All those blazing moves, all those submissions, pins, but in Fight for New York was the best game. And that's exactly why I say between the two wrestling games that was underrated, Def Jam Vendetta was by far the most underrated.
and you know what else was a fun series too? This is going to entirely different. Spear of Games, the Need for Speed series, especially some of the early ones.
Need for Speed, in my opinion, was actually pretty good. I think to be honest with you, Need for Speed was one of those games that you could pretty much say that it's one of the best racing games. You could say that NASCAR before it was NASCAR Thunder. But I think to be honest with you, when it comes to Need for Speed or best racing sports games, nobody can top down Mario Kart. Even if Need for Speed is one of the best racing games at EA, but it still can't dominate Mario Kart. NASCAR. Now let's talk about NASCAR games. The best NASCAR game has to be NASCAR Thunder 2004. And I'll tell you why. Not because NASCAR Thunder is one of the best games from 2002 all the way to like 2005, but specifically NASCAR Thunder 2004 was by far the best one because of the races that you have, such as Dale Earnhardt Jr. You still have him racing. You have Jeff Gordon racing. You have Rich Craven. No, sorry, Ricky Craven. Ricky Craven was in his best, had a really good year. You still had a few great racers out there, such as Jimmy. I think Jimmy Johnson came in later, but I think those races I mentioned were actually really good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the market's changed a lot over the years there. Hey, some of it maybe for the better, some of it for the worse. There's been some remakes of classic games. But what's crazy is actually from affordability standpoint, a lot of the old, like some of the old Need for Speed games and some of the old Star Wars games like Jedi Starfighter, the original Battlefronts, are actually a lot cheaper and can still be purchased for backward compatibility.
Now, if you want to talk about best Lego games for best Lego games movie adaptation, I would say the best Lego game has to be Lego Batman. That Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight's coming out later this year. Lego Harry Potter was another one. Lego Pirates of the Caribbean at one point. Pirates of the Caribbean at one point was a Lego game. And of course, Lego Star Wars. Like you mentioned in the very first episode of this show. Lego Star Wars was by far the best one, but I think The Rise of Skywalker had every film, including from prequel to the original to the sequel.
And before we head on out tonight, it would take a trip down memory lane to free agency because there have been a lot of free agent signings that were great steals that had a positive domino effect on a team, but then there were also those big free agent signings that fans were excited for at the time that ultimately turned out to be a flop.
The number one free agency that turned out really well, but ultimately flopped over time has to be Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, in my opinion, was by far the best running back the Philadelphia Eagles had since, dang, what was the last time Philadelphia ever had a good running back? I think Saquon Barkley was the best free agency short term. Ultimately, over time, since that Madden curse hasn't been great. Yes, you could say Brian Burns been traded to the Giants, but that actually helped the Giants front four defense actually turned up a lot more better.
Which, as far as Saquon goes, I feel like year 3 will be the long-term deciding factor on that one. Now, if we're talking, get the negative out the way, I talked about the Raiders, and they made a big mistake back-to-back years in the late 90s. First, they got Larry Brown, the secondary player who was MVP of Super Bowl 30 from the Cowboys. That he didn't pan out with the Raiders. He didn't fit in as well. Secondly, the next year they got Desmond Howard from the Packers, when really I thought Reggie White, who was arguably the greatest free agent steal in NFL history, should have been the MVP for the Packers. He didn't pan out with the Raiders. Now, that's an example of taking players who were in the right team situation. One of them was a very questionable choice for game MVP, and trying to hope that you going off that alone thinking that would help, and ultimately it didn't work out. Now, another one would be, remember Ahman Green to the Texans?
Oh, yeah, Ahman Green to the Texans. I forgot about that.
Wow. Ron Dane was considered the more lucrative option for them. Yes, that Ron Dane. Yeah. That's not necessarily Ron Dane did anything great. It's because Ahman Green was such a disappointment that it wasn't worth it. I would say Emmitt Smith to the Cardinals, but really, he was really there to help sell tickets, and I think everyone kind of knew it at the time. But if in terms of bad ones, like I would say Jeff Garcia to the Browns, because they were actually expecting him to deliver, and that ended up being probably the worst year in his career. that one season he had there until he resurrected his career first as an Eagles backup, then as a starter for the Buccaneers.
Yep. And to be honest, when it comes to free agencies like these, another free agent that was questionable has to be Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary signed a 3-year deal with the Giants. But I think in my opinion, I think Devin Singletary is not that guy. Sure, you may have Tabo Tracy being a solid running back alongside Scatterbull, who's looking like a running back RB1 job, but I think Tyrell Trace is not that guy. He's a great backup at best, but I think he's well within solid range. Now, some of these moves with the Giants in free agency made sense, like Greg Van Roten to the Giants because they need some offensive help. And some of these moves didn't make no sense. Why cast off Xavier McKinney to the Packers when you needed some help on the secondary? He was one of the few great players that we have since the secondary was terrible.
And then sometimes you get those players that you think are going to do well that don't, like Nnamdi Asomugha from the Raiders to the Eagles. That was a bigger flop than the 2011 season itself. And then you have DeMarco Murray, but to be fair, the Eagles should have seen that DeMarco Murray wasn't the fit because his running style was different. So I can partially blame them on the Eagles for not seeing it and realizing, okay, at least change the running back playbook to suit DeMarco Murray's strengths, which they didn't. His best thing that season was that one run, week 17, for the opening touchdown against the Giants. But outside of that, name anything DeMarco Murray did. Not with the Eagles, at least. But
Don't
they're
forget
playing
Ellis
good
Hobbs.
free agent signings.
Don't forget Ellis Hobbs. I think Ellis Hobbs was traded, right? Was Ellis Hobbs traded to the Falcons or anyway? I think we signed free agency.
I don't remember. Like, the reason we didn't mention Randy Moss to the Raiders because that was a trade.
Exactly. Randy Moss to the Patriots would revive his career, but he lost to the Giants ultimately.
But then as far as good free agent signing goes, you've had some great short-term ones like Jerry Rice to the Raiders. That was actually a good steal for them, and he still had something left in the tank. Rich Gannon the year before that. He came in and helped play a role in the Raiders' last run as contenders they've ever had, minus they've had their few occasions, like one-offs in the playoffs, but they've never really been contenders since then. And then, of course, Tom Brady to the Bucs, the best short-term free agent signing, alongside Peyton Manning to the Broncos.
You can name a few, but I think, to be honest with you, the Giants' defense needs a little bit help. But what do the Giants have now with that secondary gone? A mediocre playoff team? There are only 7 players left on that roster. It's been less than 5 years. Bobby Okereke, which I mentioned, is a cut candidate. They'll get an incredible package if they choose to move on from Kayvon Thibodeau. Darius Slayton is also a trade candidate. Isaiah Hodgins could potentially be wanting out next year. Potentially, Dexter Lawrence is slowly declining. Dexter Lawrence is slowly declining. I mentioned Kayvon Thibodeau. Daniel Bellinger might also be a restricted free agency. What about Darius Slayton? Not Darius Slayton. What about some players like what about Jalen Hyatt? He wants to develop more. We already know what happened to that, but I think in my perspective, I want to see how this plays out with free agency. But what did Joe Shane give the Giants in after all that radiation sickness for not paying Saquon over Daniel Jones? A bucket of footballs. This year was different, all right. It started with promise. It ends with death. The Eagles would poop on their graves like they always do.
Yeah, and the Giants free agency wise have fallen hard since the days of stealing Plexico Burress from the Pittsburgh Steelers and playing a key role in that run with Tom Coughlin.
If only Plexico Burress didn't have that nightclub incident back in 2008, we wouldn't have won another Super Bowl. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in to Everything on the Table. See you all in episode 5. I'm your co-host, Agent Warrior X. Until next time, good night, everybody.
And for Nikki Stees, thanks to Agent Warrior X for joining me. Hope you all enjoyed and hope you have a great night. We'll be back next week. We'll talk a little bit more about free agent memories before it officially starts. We'll talk about some of the more positive memories of it as well. So until next time, have a great week. Peace.